Hey there, I'm Graham, and you're listening to the Sales Nerds Live podcast.
Instead of worry about competition, I'm going to worry about my core customer and the problems that they have and how I can solve things for them, because that's going to ultimately be what differentiates you.
On today's episode of Sales Nerds Live, host Graham Collins welcomes Matthew Volm, founder of RevOps Co-op, a community of 7,000 plus RevOps professionals. Graham and Matthew discuss how to get started and how to optimize your community experience. Let's dive in.
So much of the value of a community is not just the expertise that you're able to deploy or deliver, but it's the fact that you have these programs spun up and you have these online places to congregate for people to kind of get value from one another by looking at yourself as a member in that equation instead of some outside third party, right? Oh, I'm a partner. Oh, I'm a vendor. Oh, I'm the overlord of this community, right? Just insert yourself as a member and focus on the value delivery. And that's going to be the thing will pay off so much.
Sales Nerds Live is brought to you by your friends at QuotaPath. QuotaPath removes the manual lift out of sales commissions by automating the compensation process. We calculate and track your team's commissions, prepare them for payouts, and even give your reps the ability to forecast attainment and future earnings. We're the only solution loved by reps, leadership, and finance. Come nerd out with us on Sales Nerds Live.
Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of Sales Nerds Live. As always, I'm Graham Collins, QuotaPath's Chief of Staff and resident sales nerd, and currently our interim VP of Sales. With me today is Matt Volm. I'll introduce him here in 1 second, but for some context, according to a report from Community Led, since 2020, 22% of companies have developed community teams to provide resources and build relationships where their buyers and customers are. And while it's a slow play, investments in community growth can have profound impacts on your business, both on its bottom line and brand awareness. So with me today is Matt Volm, co-founder at RevOps Co-op and co-founder of Atomic. We'll be discussing how growth teams can leverage communities to drive revenue. Welcome to the show, Matt.
Yes. Hello, Graham. Thanks for having me, my friend.
Yeah, happy to have you here. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, RevOps Co-op and Atomic, and what you're up to at each of those different places.
Currently CEO and co-founder of RevOps Co-op and Atomic. I'll give you the lowdown on RevOps Co-op first, since that kind of came first. So we started RevOps Co-op a little over 2 years ago, and it's a community for folks who are passionate about revenue operations. In those 2 years, the community has grown from 0 to now 8,000 members across 45 different countries, 2,500 plus different companies that are represented in there. And we have a variety of programs that we offer to our members, from a Slack group to blog posts that we write, events that we hold, education and courses, mentorship program, you name it, chances are we have it. And actually, as part of our community building efforts with RevOps Co-op, we kind of came across some challenges in building and managing our own Slack-based community, which is why we ultimately built our own product to solve our own problems called Atomic. And we just recently brought that product to market as well, so that other folks who are building Slack-based communities can now have a connection back to their CRM, automate some workflows like new member onboarding, and just have a better sense of activity that's happening within their Slack group and how that can relate back to their marketing and sales efforts. So that's my I'll say my kind of experience over the last couple of years in a nutshell. Excellent.
And remind the audience where you're based, Matt.
So I'm currently based in the great state of Wisconsin, Madison, Wisconsin area, to be exact. I grew up here in a very small town. After college, I actually lived out in Seattle, Washington, and Portland, Oregon for roughly 11, 12 years, but just recently moved back so we could be closer to family and, to be quite honest, take advantage of some free babysitting that we now get from our parents and some other family members.
Yeah, my sister posted something the other day that said the only parenting hack there is to live near near the grandparents. So,
yep, and it's a good one.
I bring that up because, as somebody who's based in Portland, Maine, and had kind of a similar situation, grew up in a small town in Maine, lived in Austin, Texas for a number of years, and then returned back home to Maine. I appreciated that.
Yeah,
gotta keep those small cities going. The tech scene.
Yep, that's right.
First off, feel like everybody is talking about communities. There's communities for RevOps organizations, sales. I'm in probably 3 or 4 different communities. Why do you think communities have grown so much recently?
I mean, I can tie this back to, I think, the revenue operations trend that we're obviously familiar with, given the space that QuotaPath is building in, and then obviously the space that we have a community in. If you kind of look at RevOps or revenue operations, it makes a lot of sense that revenue as a single most important metric is critical to every business, and that you want some kind of end-to-end view into how things are operating, right? Things very much were moving from this siloed, approach of marketing versus sales versus post-sales to now essentially a cohesive revenue engine go-to-market team. And I think what we're seeing with community is essentially the same thing. Companies are realizing that people are making buying decisions differently than they used to, and the same things that used to work no longer work. And specifically, the 2 things that I think are impacting this are one, a lot of people out there who are currently in buying roles expect to be able to try before they buy. They need some sort of exposure to a free trial or a free version of a solution or some product walkthrough to understand what is going on in this product. Does it serve the use cases that that I need? And then the other thing, which is where communities come in, is they're looking to their peers or essentially other people like them to understand, how are you solving this specific problem? Does this product work for you? What are some other solutions out there in the market that I may not have heard about? They're not necessarily just going to Google and, searching for a bunch of stuff, but instead they're trying to find other people who are directors of revenue operations that can provide them some feedback, right? People have maybe been there, done that. And I think those are the 2 ways that people are making buying decisions today that are very different than how they were making buying decisions, years ago. And I think that's the reason why businesses are moving to this, community-led type of model, where they know they either need their own communities or they need community teams to partner with other communities that are out there, so that they can kind of be in these places where these kind of buying decisions are getting made.
Got it. Yeah, and I've seen that in all kinds of different communities. It's like, hey, we're looking for a tool to XYZ. I won't call it anything specific, because then we'll get talking about specific companies. But well, how about this? I'm looking for a tool for commission tracking. Does anybody have any recommendations? Those kinds of questions pop up in communities all the time. And I'm curious about your take on. And we'll talk about build versus buy, if you will, with communities here in a minute. But I see this a lot of times as well with very well-known and well-used products. Oftentimes those communities can also be a form of support and a form of, hey, does anybody know how to do XYZ in my CRM? Or can anybody offer any recommendations on how to automate this specific thing? So I'm curious, do you see a lot of, is it mostly that buying and the pre-sales component that companies are leaning into, or is there also the support and kind of offloading some of the support to the community that you see?
Yeah, I think if you do it right, you can have a big pre-sale and post-sale component to your community for all the reasons you mentioned, right? With RevOps Co-op, originally our startup, we were working to build revenue operations software. So we kind of built a community as part of our own go-to-market efforts. And so early on, our strategy was very much around being a thought leader in the RevOps space, raising awareness of who we are as a company, but not highlighting the product. Instead, we were highlighting our subject matter expertise and delivering value to our members through these community programs. But our plan very much was, hey, everyone who becomes a customer of our software product, is going to get invited to join our community, might have some private Slack channels where they can interact with each other. Because one, they can be ambassadors for your product, right? If other prospects out there are trying to understand solutions, who better to answer about options, right, than your current customers who are happy with your product or solution. But then, like on the support side, right? If your customer success team can be in your Slack group where those people are, and if they can also interact directly with one another, that not only can help solve those support related items that might come up, right? So your support costs could potentially go down, but it could also help your customers be more successful with your product, right? People can ask questions about like, hey, I'm trying to do this with the product. Has anyone else done this before? And you can kind of crowdsource some product solutions that way as well. So it can help with product activation. It can help with customer support. It can help with your current customers act as ambassadors for your own product. It can help with just delivering value to your prospects completely outside of your company or your solution. So lots of value to be had there on both, like I said, the pre-sale side and the post-sale side as well.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so clearly you believe heavily in the value of communities, and if folks are tuning in here, they probably do as well. And so, or at least now they're sold on the value of communities. So give us some real world examples, some best practices for growth teams, or I guess how you've seen communities in the past, or companies in the past use communities really well.
Kind of going back to one of the things we talked about, early on in terms of starting your own community versus, partnering with other communities. I think, certainly you should be doing one of those things for sure, because there's tons of value to be had. So like on the partner side, for example, identify, every company should already have their ICP identified, right? And, go out and find existing communities that serve your ICP, whether that's obviously in RevOps, you could have RevOps Co-op. For sales, there's other communities out there like, Pavilion and Modern Sales Pros, right? But like identify who your core, your core customer is, your ICP, and find communities where, where they interact, where they engage, and, look to partner with those communities. But the goal of any partnership there is not to really deploy or even highlight the product. Again, go back to what I mentioned earlier, like what people don't want product marketing through community, for example. Like they'll ultimately want to try your product and figure out if it works for them. But instead deploy your thought leadership and your subject matter expertise through that community, because that's really one of the ways that you can deliver value to these folks. And people will ultimately associate that expertise with any product that you're building. And so QuotaPath's a great example, right? Experts in the commissions and incentive management space. Deploy all the thought leadership and the expertise that you have there from things like comp plans for customer success teams, accelerators versus decelerators, right? Like all that stuff that any of your core customers needs to know to just like manage their own incentive plan and build out their own comp plans. Because the more intelligent you look there, people are going to assume that obviously that level of expertise and proficiency is built into your product. So on the partnering side, that's one way to look at it is partner with communities where your core customer exists, deploy your thought leadership, your subject matter expertise through that community, deliver value to the folks that are there day in and day out, and you will see huge return through pipeline contribution, pipeline influence, and overall air cover for your own outbound or ABM efforts. And same thing on the, if you went the, build your own community route, communities, if you look at them like any other, kind of product offering, right? You got to start somewhere. So, figure out what that kind of minimum viable starting point is. Don't assume that it's going to be without work. You will need like people hours to invest in getting a community started. But again, it can, pay huge dividends for you on all the pre-sale stuff that we mentioned, right? With being a thought leader in the space, deploying your expertise to your prospects, but then also the post-sale items that we talked about before. Have your current customers congregate in one area. They can be ambassadors to your prospects. They can help interact with other customers, right? Help support them so your customer support costs go down, and even help activate your own customers in other use cases, right? So they can be more successful with your product. They can, you can retain that revenue for longer, that customer base for longer. You can potentially drive upsell and expansion because your customers are driving awareness of these other things that are out there. By having, folks in one spot, there's just a tremendous amount of value. But again, like you can't just kind of spin something up and assume that it'll take care of itself. So like there's going to be, work that goes into that. So those are kind of the gives and takes a little bit of kind of figuring out where you want to start.
personally for us, a lot of times it's like, hey, what is our ICP talking about? What do they care about? And for us, it has actually been a big content generation tool for us, where we say, hey, what are the questions that RevOps professionals are asking? How can we answer that? Now, it may not help us right off the bat, but we can then say, well, if somebody's asking it in RevOps Co-op, there are probably 100 other people asking it, and they aren't a part of this community. And so how can we can answer that as part of content or part of the other thing is you can do a lot of learning. You can do a lot of learning from those communities. I do a lot of comp plan consultation, and I learned a lot of what I know from communities, from the people in those communities. I didn't just know all of this stuff. So that's pretty fascinating for me to have that as like a look. Not only are you a thought leader in this community, you're surrounded by thought leaders. You don't have to always have the right answer. Sometimes it's okay sometimes people ask questions in communities I'm part of about sales compensation. I just sit back and see what other people have to say, because I have my thoughts, but I want to see what other people have to say. I'll contribute. First, I wanted to ask, like, how do people find these communities? What is the best way if I'm like, okay, yes, I want to be a part of a community of corporate attorneys. I want to find the community where all the corporate attorneys hang out. How do I go about finding that community?
Yeah. So I think, if you're searching for a community kind of for yourself, I mean, one of the things is like, look at the places where, you already exist, say online, right? So if you're on LinkedIn, in that case, one, you could search LinkedIn, or two, you could put a call out to your network, a quick post like, hey, I'm looking for for online communities for other corporate attorneys. Anyone have any recommendations? That's going to drive a huge amount of potential options for you. There's always the good old like Google search as well. But then the other thing is, if you don't want to put something out there on say like publicly on LinkedIn, you've got to have some colleagues, some connections, right? Who you're close with. Like ask them, ask people who are similar to you, because chances are they're going to be in these communities as well.
Yeah, and I guess your customers as well. I mean, that's one that you can say if you have a customer base, going out and asking, hey, where do you, if you needed help, where would you find it? What kinds of communities are you a part of?
Exactly.
Is good. Cool. Well, so then that leads me into the fun question, which are, what are some bad examples? What are some examples of things that you see a company come into a community and makes you cringe?
Yeah, I think the hard. It's always hard. It's always hard to say to, like, I don't know. On one hand, we're always selling something, but I think the how you do it is really where it comes down to that, right? So I think for any companies or people at companies who are participating in communities where they're call it like their core customers or core prospects might exist, is like always act as a member of the community, and nothing else, which can be hard, right? If someone brings up like your company, or if someone brings up like your, like ask a question on your specific topic, you're like, oh man, if I could own, like, I just really want to show them our product and how it solves for the specific thing that they're asking about. Like, that's actually not that's not the way to deliver value to that person. Even though that might be your initial reaction, instead be like, hey, what current customers do I have that, might be able to provide feedback for this person around that? What content do I have that can help people compare different solutions, or at least identify what their requirements are, right? If someone's kind of actively looking for a new solution, right? Like, that's going to be the stuff that kind of goes a really long way. So don't try to hold back from some of those, initial kind of reactions. Just treat it.
I really like the way, not to cut you off, but I really like what you said about be a member first. Like, you are a member of the community primarily. And try not to pitch. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off. What else do we have?
No, and I think like that's to go back to like the value that we were talking about, like so much of the value of a community is not just like whether you're a partner or like the primary contributor is not just the like say the expertise that you're able to deploy or deliver, but it's the fact that you have these programs spun up and you have these online places to congregate for people to kind of get value from one another, right? And that's where by looking at yourself as a member in that equation instead of like some outside like third party, right? Like, oh, I'm a partner, oh, I'm a vendor, oh, I'm a like the the overlord of this community, right? Like just insert yourself as a member and focus on the value delivery aspect, and that's going to be the thing that'll will pay off like so much. And so yeah, like the other things to avoid, don't think you can get away with again not spending time or effort on these things. Like anything new, it is going to require time and investment, but again, done the right way can produce huge ROI. And yeah, just focus on being a member first. Oliver, come here. I've got my little 4-year-old in the background. He might pop up. Yeah.
No worries. My dog got a brand new squeaky toy yesterday. So if you see me go on mute, it's because he is trying to show it. So excellent. Well, so one of the concerns that I've heard in the past when it comes to communities like this is like, well, what if my competitor is in there? I don't want to answer questions. I don't want to give information. Somebody says, hey, how should I compensate my sales reps, for example? I don't want to chime in and say, hey, this is what we do at Acme Co. when my competitor is sitting right next to me. How do you get around that objection?
I guess one of the things I go back to is, what we just talked about before, right? Is just the, like the value creation exercise is certainly member to member. And then the other thing that I'll mention, which is more just my own personal experiences and, like building a variety of different kind of startups and working at a bunch of different startups is that, at the end of the day, ideas are easy. Execution is hard. And so like when it comes to your competition, like you certainly want to be aware of them and know what they're doing, but trying to like find out specifics, duplicate or replicate the stuff that they're doing and how they're doing it, that's not going to be a recipe for long-term success. And so so like what I always try to do is like, hey, instead of like worry about competition, like I'm going to worry about my core customer and the problems that they have and how I can solve things for them, because that's going to ultimately be what differentiates you. And so yeah, even like the example, right, that you gave, right, if you throw out a specific there, I mean, obviously you don't want to be sharing like confidential information, and that stuff you can always move into a DM or some other like more private channel. But also know that at the end of the day, it's really hard to execute on stuff, right? Coming from a guy who, like, my first startup, we raised some money and ultimately had to shut it down because we never found product market fit. And my current one now, we've had multiple iterations of like our own pivots, right? So like startups are hard, and if if you're kind of constantly focused on the competition aspect, you're ultimately just going to lose sight of what's in front of you. So yeah, like focus on your ICP, your core customer, right, your core member, and deliver value to them, right? Do what your competition is not doing, and do that by not worrying about those things that they might be up to.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's good business advice in general, not necessarily related to communities. And I think that's sometimes I have conversations with brand new entrepreneurs who say like, oh, I've got this idea, I need some advice, can we chat? I'm like, sure. And then I say, okay, so what's the idea? And they're like really suspicious or like sketchy about telling me details. And I'm like, look, you're not the first person to come up with whatever your idea is. You're not exactly. Like, this isn't, don't worry, I'm not going to steal your idea because it's like, oh my goodness, nobody has ever thought of that before. So I think that's a good thing, is like ideas aren't revolutionary. The execution is.
Exactly.
So the question that I find super fascinating and one that gets asked a lot is like, okay, I go in, I find all these communities about corporate lawyers, but like, it's not quite right. I don't need, none of these are exactly what I want. So I'm going to go, maybe I want to build a community, as opposed to, like, I say buy, latch yourself onto another community, become a member, become a sponsor, whatever. So what are the pros and cons of creating a community versus buying a community, if you will? And I know it's not buying a community.
Yeah. So I think if you go the partner route, one of the big things to consider there is typically you can do that with your existing resources, existing budget, right? You're focused more on, hey, like we're experts in this area, so like that's where our thought leadership is, and we're writing content, and community is going to be one of those things that can help you kind of amplify and do kind of execute on a lot of things that you might already be doing, versus like building your own community. Obviously just a lot more to consider in terms of the programs that you build, the time, the resources that you're going to need. You're now starting something new, right? So even if you use existing headcount to do it, like you're now devoting some portion of their time that was otherwise spent doing other things to this new initiative or this new program. And a lot of the like the engagement that you're going to try to drive, especially early on as you grow your community, like you're going to have to, I'll say source staff, but like you're going to have to be the driver of conversations. You're going to be, creating content. You're going to be delivering a lot of the value up front. But then at some point, you're going to reach this tipping point where, like in your Slack group, for example, all of a sudden you've got a critical mass of members, and people ask questions and members start responding to things. And then eventually you're just sitting back and kind of moderating things and watching out for bad actors, versus having to like drive a daily discussion on certain topics. So that's a thing that really is the difference between, kind of the build your own, essentially a new initiative, a new marketing effort, versus the partner, where you've got existing programs and kind of a foundation to really start from, and really just amplify some of those existing efforts that you're already doing.
Got it. Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And I guess one telltale sign as well might be like, maybe there isn't a community. Maybe there isn't a hangout area where people do this. And I think that what I find interesting is like a lot of times I see people trying to way too closely associate the community that they're creating with the company. And I don't know if you have thoughts on this, especially being RevOps Co-op versus then, you said you were trying to build RevOps software. Like if we just created a quota paths compensation community, like that might not be as successful as if I just created like, commission community. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm doing a bad job naming it, but I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think one, I look at this a lot, but like riches are in the niches. So starting like as niche as you can is always good. So to your point on like, do existing communities exist for this purpose, right? Like I was talking to someone the other day who started a community for fractional executives, right? People who are like fractional CROs, CFOs, COOs, right? As a community, and just got like already got a couple hundred people in there. And so like, that's a very, like very niche, kind of space, versus just like finance, operations, right? Much broader. That's one consideration for sure. And then at least my belief on the community side is like, if you want to brand your community as like company XYZ community, what you're really building is essentially a user community, right? Or a customer community, which is totally fine, but you're going to miss out on like any of the pre-sale, pre-customer side of things. And so if you're looking to drive as much value from the community pre-sale and post-sale as possible, and you want to build your own, I would have something that is separately branded but affiliated with your core company, right? So like some good examples of this are like Spendesk has like their CFO community, which is like, I think it's CFO Connect, but it's like CFO Connect, a community by Spendesk, right? That's a great way of like, we've got this separate separate brand, separate website, separate thing that is our community for these people. And, it's basically run by us, right? The company. And yeah, that allows you to, again, associate with prospects, people on the pre-sale side, customers, people on the post-sale side, customer support, and allows you to get the most value. And I think also, be looked at as the most trusted resource in your particular space then. So yeah, that's typically the route that I always, recommend for folks that are looking to, kind of start something on their own.
That's great. Awesome. Well, we have been talking a lot about community, very helpful advice, some key takeaways, and some things where I'm like, ooh, maybe I should be doing that in my community, in the communities I'm a part of more. So really appreciate that. Always ask folks the same last 3 questions. So number 1, what piece of advice would you give yourself on the first day of your career?
So the number 1 piece of advice I would give myself and anyone else just starting off is give yourself permission to change your mind, and to change your mind frequently. The reason why I would say that is, 1, it's actually kind of crazy that, like at the age of 18, you're expected to go to college and like pick some major that is somehow going to be the thing you do for the next, 40 years of your career. Like that's just insane. So don't feel like you need to, like be locked in to the thing that you thought you wanted to do. Like that's not failure. At the end of the day, you'll learn something about every new adventure that you take. If you think you want to start your own business, like go out and try. And then you'll learn whether or not that's something you actually want to do. And if you don't want to do that, like that is not a failure. You don't need to pick something and do that for the rest of your life. So that's the thing that I would always say is like, yeah, feel free to change your mind, and change your mind frequently. Just make sure you learn something every time. I started off as a CPA was my first job.
I was going to say, this sounds like sagacious advice from somebody who's experienced it.
Yeah. So I went from like, CPA doing like, tax returns and like audits, to like corporate finance, to strategic finance, to like in-house accounting, management consulting. I went to business school, went back into corporate finance, venture capital for a little bit, and then started some companies, worked at startups, right? So yeah, like learned something about all those, consider myself a better person because of all those experiences. And yeah, that's the one thing that I wish I kind of knew more about right day one of my career.
Well, this kind of goes into that. It sounds like you've done a whole lot of different things in your career, but if you weren't doing what you're currently doing, what would your career be, or what would your job be? Yeah,
that's a good one. I mean, the thing that I actually like outside of work and kind of starting my own and running my own companies, the things I guess there's 3 things that I really enjoy, which are kind of odd combinations. Some not so weird as like the others. One is indoor plants. So like as you can see, I've got like tons of plants. I think I counted, and we've got like 40 some plants throughout our house. So love having a bunch of indoor plants in kind of every different room. I have a 4 and a 6-year-old, 2 boys as well. So I love spending time with them, whether it's coaching sports for them, volunteering at their schools. So I would definitely kind of do more of that. And then the third odd combination is I enjoy CrossFit a bunch. And so if I just could do whatever I wanted and, could like work out and coach classes and do stuff like that, those would be a combination of those 3 things. If I could just live a life of leisure, would be the things that I would probably be doing.
I like it. I don't know how we could combine all of those. I mean, I suppose you could have a gym with a lot of plants and maybe
my kid like a part-time daycare attached or something.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe a part-time daycare. All right. Finally, what are you watching, reading, or listening to right now? And that can be either work related or not work related.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't have any insightful recommendations on the work or business front for folks. But the thing that I do, believe in is like, laughing and having fun. And so the thing that my wife and I have been doing recently is we go through these cycles. So we we're in our mid-30s, and we grew up our like teenage years. We were watching Friends, the sitcom, a bunch, and so we go through these cycles where we just like start rewatching things from the very beginning. And so we're like halfway through, which is like season 4 or season 5 of Friends, and that's our like Friday and Saturday night thing that we do together. We laugh. We also talk about how ridiculous it is that, like, you know, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, they had like phones in their houses, and that was how they called each other. And there was no element of like texting or any of those things that we take for granted today. And how we used to make fun of our parents for watching like their old, you know, TV shows, and our boys are probably going to do the same thing with us. So yeah, that's what I'm currently rewatching for. I mean, honestly, it's probably like the 20th, 30th time, something like that now. And would encourage anyone else, like, go out, find some show or, you know, something, right, that makes you laugh, and go enjoy it.
I like it. That's great. Awesome. So to cap us off here, any final plugs?
No, I think for anyone who's interested or passionate about revenue operations, like I said, we've got a community of 8,000 plus folks from around the world. It's a free community to join. RevOpsCoop.com is where you can find us and fill out a quick application there. And on the community front, for anyone with a Slack-based community who wants to automate some workflows, get some engagement statistics, and push some of their community data back into their CRM, Atomic is the product that we brought to market recently. Also free to use and free to sign up. So you can find that at onatomic.com. And then the last thing that I don't think I even mentioned the last time we chatted, Graham, was we do have a community for B2B community builders. So anyone who's passionate about B2B community building, that community is called Community Built, and you can find that at gocommunitybuilt.com. So all these things are also on my LinkedIn profile. So go check me out there, and you can find them. You can find them there.
Excellent. That's kind of a meta community. It's a community.
Yeah, I know, right?
I like it. Wonderful. And then on my side, a couple of plugs. Obviously, QuotaPath. If you were a longtime watcher of Sales Nerds Live, you know QuotaPath commission tracking software allows you to automate the complete commission tracking process, provide visibility and transparency across the organization to sales reps, to sales leaders, finance, RevOps. Everybody has the ability to see the same numbers and get on the same page with commissions. And additionally, if you're looking to build a new comp plan, which it's February, so hopefully you're a little bit through the comp plan building phase. But we do offer Compensation Hub, which is a completely free to use tool, database of compensation plans, including modelers that allow you to enter in some information about your business and get some recommended compensation plans with actual specific structures. And then it feeds directly into QuotaPath for free. Now, you don't even need to do an email address to sign up for Compensation Hub. You can just go and check it out. And that's on our website. It's also comp.quotapath.com. Excellent. Matt, really appreciate your time today. This was a lot of fun. I learned a lot about communities, and thanks everybody for tuning in.
Thanks, Graham.
See you.